Good evening and welcome to another episode of Pressing Issues. My name is Jason Diffendahl and I'll be your host tonight for the May 24th, 2020 episode. I'd like to introduce my illustrious panel tonight. First of all, welcoming newcomer Eric Morton.
Good evening. How's it going? Glad to be here.
And we'll welcome back Axel.
Good evening.
And Rich Grafton.
Hello, everyone.
So here's our panel for tonight, and of course, with Disney Springs having just reopened this past week, that's going to be the focus of a lot of our conversation. Then we'll move on to some other topics, including, let me see, I don't even know if I have it. We'll talk a bit about Universal news. With their parks opening and their opening plans for that. And then we'll talk about what we think about Universal taking the lead in the reopening and Disney having not even announced a date yet. But let's start with Disney Springs. So Axel and Eric, you two guys were both there on the very first day they opened. And you've been back since then also, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about what opening day was like, your impressions, how things went, how was the crowds, that kind of thing.
Sure. You want me to go first? I think I got there a little earlier than Axel. We got there. We had I believe, 11 a.m. lunch reservation. So I got there around 10:30. I expected maybe a bigger crowd than there was. It wasn't very crowded at all. I parked in Orange, go Orange, the best parking lot there is. And went and very organized, very efficient. Advent Health is there. They have it. You immediately start seeing the social distancing being marked out on the pavement once you get from your car to kind of the sidewalks that lead to where you would enter into Springs. Quick temperature check, friendly hello, and I was off. Masks are required. They have a lot of signage talking about masks and all the social distancing, all those type of things. I think we've covered this extensively. There are a lot of articles and a lot of pictures of the signs. You can't miss them. There's a lot of markings on the sidewalks and pavement that are, either social distancing marks, so 6 feet apart or thereabouts. And in addition to that, there are some areas that are high traffic that have one-way arrows. So to, keep your traffic kind of, on the right side, basically just like an American road, I guess. And that I know is most notably in that area. If you come down by the AMC Theater and from the Orange Garage and you turn right, that kind of passageway, kind of where Bongos used to be, there's a construction wall. There's a lot of one-way signage there. People were happy to be there. It was very hot. I will say, I know a lot of people are concerned about the masks. That's a concern there. It is very hot. And my mask was uncomfortable, and I'm rethinking my mask, which kind I want to have, and all those kind of things. It was uncomfortable, but everyone was happy to be there on the first day. People were spread apart. It wasn't crowded at all. Went to lunch, again, waiting for your lunch. There's waiting to get into a boathouse, there's plenty of markings on the ground showing you where to stand as your party waits to be seated. Once you get into the restaurant, then you get to your table and are seated, and you remove your mask. The tables were spaced out far apart, and the wait staff was all still wearing masks, but the party sitting at the table when you are eating and drinking and such are not wearing masks. So overall, I thought for the first day, it looked pretty orderly. I wasn't sure what to expect. Lime Garage was not even open when I was there. So it's possible they've had enough traffic to open Lime over the last few days. But when I was, they have, because I also have gone another time and I did park in Lime. So I've tested it out from Orange and Lime. But anyway, Lime wasn't even open during lunchtime. I guess they're trying to, probably minimize the amount of staff that they need to provide coming in with temperature checks and so on. So anyway, I thought it was pretty efficient, and I was pretty happy with the experience altogether.
Axel, you got there a little bit later than Eric did. What was your experience?
We got there a bit later, just like we did for City Walk. We wanted to wait it out and see how easy it would be to get in. So first of all, like parking, we talked about it last week. Parking at Universal was really organized with the cones, and you couldn't like park next to each other. So that didn't happen at Disney Springs. So that was a win for Universal because like everybody can park everywhere, which if you go to the higher levels is quite easy to find a parking spot. But like downstairs or where you drive in, because the upper level, the ramp is not open. So you have no choice other than going in on the downstairs level. But then going in, it was pretty easy. People of Advent Help were really like friendly, walked in. And we were like, when we were in, it was like 22 to 12, like almost noon. And we saw, when we walked in through Orange, went straight to the right, and we saw Chicken Guy. The Chicken Guy had a line from starting at their door, passing the Tommy Bahama store. So just imagine they kept the wall, so it was a pretty long line. 6 feet distance, although there's markings on the floor. The markings on the floor don't go past your own store, if that makes sense. It's like there's 3 to 4 stickers in front of your store or your restaurant. With Chicken Guy, like that was good for the first 4 parties. Once after that, it was just everybody standing next to each other. Like there was no more 6 feet distance. But we did a little walk around, and it was pretty good. The good thing about the warm weather is that my glasses didn't fog up, so that's a plus because it's so hot they can't even fog up. So I was happy about that. I was surprised to see Ariba's open. I didn't know that they had their own people. I thought it was like, okay, its own company, but still operated by Disney. Apparently not, because they were open as the only one in the whole co-op. Once you go past that, I mean, most things are closed, so nothing much to see there. A line at T-Rex, at the boathouse. But we just wanted to be there in the morning to check it out because we knew we had dinner reservations and had to come back in the afternoon. So I don't know, Eric, if you want to say what happened after your dinner, and I'll pick back for dinner.
Yeah, sure. And you know, I had to leave and go back to work, so I was only there for a short time. The lines, like he said, I guess I left that out. Yeah, there's only so many lines in front of a business before it's just kind of you're in a no man's land. And so I do see that being a problem, especially at a place like Chicken Guy where people curiously line up for mediocre chicken. But the line was pretty long. The line was pretty long. I saw in Tom's video for Chicken Guy. I wasn't there for that. Starbucks over by World of Disney was open. The Starbucks on the West End was not, but I think it has since opened. But you can go to some of the windows and get served like a beer or something, and then you can go, find a bench and sit down and take off your mask to drink a beer, which I did on my second time going in there. And that's when I started seeing, we could talk about it later, but I started seeing people not respecting the social distancing and masks a little bit more on Friday than I had seen the previous day. On my previous visit.
That's when we got back in the evening, where we were pretty shocked even, because we walked in the morning and everybody had their mask, respecting it. And then around 6, when we arrived back, I was like surprised to see so many people. Like, you can take off your mask to drink, but it's like taking off your mask to drink, putting it back on, walking, and only taking it off for drinking. That was not the case. So people just walked around, no mask, drink in their hands. So I have my plan set for when the parks open. I'm going to paint a Starbucks mug on the inside. I'm just going to paint it brown. So I have a full mug at all time and just walk around without a mask. This humanity is doomed with the people that I have seen. So there's no mask requirements when you sit anywhere. So as soon as you sit your butt down, you can take off your mask no matter where or what you're doing. Once you have a drink in your hand, no masks, apparently. And for all kind of pictures that include selfies, no mask required. Even though if there's people around you, you don't care, you don't have to wear a mask. I was really surprised at that. We saw like management walking by and seeing people with no masks and like not saying anything. And honestly, although that I'm still thinking that, because especially like for those who don't know, I moved here from Belgium. We had recently now one of our biggest zoos opening again. There's no requirement of wearing a mask when you're outside. You are required to wear a mask when you go to the inside portions or to the aquarium or to go eat something, well, just walk in, but not outside. So still, I think that outside, they could be a bit more like flexible on wearing the mask, but still, if it's asked, you do it. And I thought going to City Walk, I saw the rules like better followed than they were at Disney Springs, at least to my opinion. And every time I see pictures, and I got a lot of bad word for that because I tweeted something at the evening with people not wearing masks. If you're retweeted by Walt Disney World News today, that's a lot of people seeing your tweet. So I saw a lot of comments, and really it couldn't be further apart. People saying you have to wear, you don't have to wear. We're somewhere in the middle. So it's a weird situation, which honestly, I'm afraid once the parks will open, if they don't enforce it right now, and this is a test, I don't see them doing it once we're in the parks.
So in your experience, then, you think it was enforced better at Universal than at City Walk than at Disney Springs?
The thing is, and I think that's the main reason, and it's not that people are smarter or do different things at City Walk. There's way more things open to start with at Disney. There's this little Joffrey coffee, there's Starbucks. So you have people with drinks in their hands way more than you have at City Walk. City Walk is also way smaller than Disney Springs. So you have to have been walking around for a few hours. You're going to tend to take off that mask, which is understandable. But still, I was surprised. So yes, I saw less people without a mask or even no people without a mask in City Walk, but it's smaller and the conditions are still different.
So you think it's
and I would say
not necessarily that people are ignoring the rules. It's that they don't get as tired of the mask at City Walk because they're not there for as long a period of time.
I would think so.
And I would say also, there's plenty of room at Disney Springs right now to social distance. If you want to sit in a corner somewhere, I sat at like a chair at Jock Lindsay's 50 feet from the nearest person and drank a beer, and I did take my mask off to do that. However, I put my mask on when I was not drinking it and when I was done, and then I saw groups of people walking around without a mask on as if they were daring someone to try to tell them to put their mask on. So if the cast members are shy about enforcing this policy at Disney Springs, which is free to get into, I think they're going to be a lot more hesitant to approach people who just paid over $100 to get into a theme park if the parks were to open up with this same mask policy.
On the other hand, on that paying part, because we've been talking about that the last few days, I do think that people who, I'm going to rephrase that, I hope that people who pay $100 to be at a park or have an annual pass will be more respectful than the ones coming to Disney Springs. I mean, come on, people were having a barbecue out of Cooks of Dublin. So there's some limits of having respect and following the rules. And I think that you might do better when you have paid. I'm not going to take a grill and grill sausages in front of Casey's. I'm not going to do that.
Wondered how long it would take us to get there. 16 minutes, not bad.
Well, so the pictures that we saw, because we were there the moment that it happened, and once we walked up there, they already took the tables inside. But from those pictures, you can tell that those people were already eating hot dogs, means they had a time to start the fire, cook the first batch of hot dogs, and eat it. So that's the thing that makes me wonder, like, and especially this is something totally different, but if it takes that long for Disney security management that was there the first day, cast members, if it takes them that long to see that somebody is putting on a fire, barbecuing sausages, feeding their family, and if it takes that long, how long will it take to say to people like, please put on a mask, or like respecting, obeying the rules? I don't know how many discussions in public we are going to have, because like Eric said, there's people waiting to get a comment like, look, I'm not wearing a mask, dare me. So I don't know how, like, people that do say it themselves, that not going to wait for a cast member like I do when I see people smoking in the park. I don't know how many discussions that is going to bring to us.
So, do you think that people that were cooking the hot dogs over the open grill were doing it daring Disney security to come stop them, or do you think they were just oblivious? Like, I saw that picture and I'm like, what could these people possibly be thinking? Like, there were a lot of people. There was probably like 12 people in that group, and a lot of kids, and they were just cooking hot dogs on a table over some hot coals. Like, were these people? I don't even know what they were thinking. Like, were they trying
I would have thought it was some
see
bizarre
what they could
street
get away with it?
It's.
I mean, they were clearly.
There's a lot of things closed, and those people wanted to have like a jolly picnic, and they choose Disney Springs. I mean, I get it. You have a lot of kids, and there's nothing to do. Let's go to Disney Springs. At least it has Disney in the name. And no, there's no Casey's here, but hey, I'll grill you hot dogs. I don't think it was to dare anybody. They just wanted to spend the day outside, and they like, there you have, there was the barbecue. I mean, that's the difference with.
But
with
do they
City
not
Walk.
know? Like, do they not understand that there are restrictions on open barbecues in different places? Like, there's even. I mean, there's city parks in Orlando where you're not allowed to have an open grill. Why do they think that they could go into a place that's a shopping and dining district and have an open grill? It boggles my mind how these people thought that this was like allowed or legal.
Yeah, no comment, I guess.
And it's,
So
it's
I
not
wonder
so much,
too.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Rich.
It's not so much that I just, before we start going down the legal rabbit hole, it's not so much that it's legal because the law applies differently on private property than it would on a public park. Disney said no, and that should be sufficient when it comes to open flames. They say no everywhere, all the time, on the back of your ticket, on the signs where you go in, and etc.
Right.
So who knows? Why? Maybe it's a test case. Maybe they were oblivious. Maybe we'll find out that there was a hidden camera, and we'll see it on AFV in a few weeks.
Viral stunt.
Yeah, viral stunt. Exactly. Who knows? I did want to key off of something that both Axel and Eric did say, and that was what was the number and, I don't know, presence of Disney folk when you were walking through Disney Springs, and was there a difference the first time versus the second time?
I was greeted by Josh D'Amaro. How better can it be?
Yeah.
But it wasn't like.
You didn't shake his hand, though, right?
I did not shake his hand. He was really friendly. I even congratulated him for his new role. At least I think it was a congratulation that was in place. But there was a big difference between the first day at Universal, where basically you had 30 management people being there, walking around, checking everything. I did not see that at Disney Springs. Maybe that's because half is still furloughed, but I did notice that more in City Walk. So like Disney employees, a few security, like custodials, but not the amount of management that we saw at City Walk.
I think it's worth pointing out too that a lot of the, like we said, the Advent Health people are there. So I think that kind of, from Disney's perspective, kind of eliminates any idea that there was some idea that maybe they would let people in anyway if they had a temperature, because only one person was refused entrance for having a temperature. Maybe, eliminates that conflict of interest by having sort of a third party doing the temperature scans and upon entry. I don't know. There were a lot of those people, but I didn't see a ton of Disney staff, but there wasn't anything to look at between really when you walk past the old bongos and everything else. They had a lot of people there asking you to take surveys. So a lot of people asking, they were very big on the surveys.
Eric, what we didn't talk about, and that's something that for me was noticeable because we never talked, or I've never seen it at City Walk, is that at Disney, they have a quote unquote cool down tent, which got a lot of negative comments, although I don't think it's that bad. I mean, it's Florida, it's freaking hot outside. If you have people walking the whole while to get there sweating and they take their temperature and they're just over, at least they have a place, and then they don't have to say like, no, you're not coming in, you're going out. Right. Because if the questions that they ask, if all your answers are no, then at least they give you the chance to say like, okay, like take a moment, sit down, cool down, and we'll take your temperature again. So it's
like in the most extreme situation, what if you rode your bike to Disney Springs? Right? Like, it's pretty hot out, and you just rode a bike for 8 miles to get to Disney Springs. You're going to be hot. So I think that the cool-down tents are a spectacular idea. I think it's fair. It makes things fair for people to get a second chance to check their temperature. I think it makes sense. It's probably necessary for certain people, like people that rode it on a bike or whatever. So yeah, I think it makes sense.
And about like they had quite a time, and I know we're going to talk about Disney and missed opportunities later on this show, but for me, one of the missed opportunities is that there's still no security going into Disney Springs. There is at City Walk. Disney Springs is a destination where a lot of people come together. So I think security-wise, I know it's not the easiest thing to do, but if they would check, it would feel better, because it's still a destination where thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions come true. So I think it's a missed opportunity to not install like proper security to check. I know it's a big thing, but it would be better, because like when you go to City Walk, you're checked, and I know like City Walk with the X-ray scanners is still better than Disney. Still, if they would check, they would have seen the barbecue in that lady's bag.
Yeah, I was gonna say all you need is like 4 or 5 more people to try to have barbecues at Disney Springs, and they're gonna have to start checking what you bring in, because otherwise that's just gonna keep happening.
Well, now there's no control. Everybody can now go and say, let's put up a picnic, let's go to Disney Springs. I know there's no entertainment, so big difference as well with City Walk. There was no entertainment at all. There was a balloon lady, so that's something, but there's no music. But let's say that there's the regular entertainment, and from now on, everybody just comes in with their own bottle of wine, glasses of wine, and let's have a party. Let's sit down and let's have a picnic there. I think at some point, I don't know when, but they're gonna have to start checking. Like I don't know how longer it will take.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think it was probably here's my question: is obviously at City Walk it's very easy because there's a single point of entry, and the City Walk and the parks are all contained in one area. Obviously at Disney Springs there are multiple points of entry, and it's not anywhere near a park. So my thought is maybe they designed Disney Springs to have the ability to incorporate security checks, but I don't know. It just seems like there's enough points of entry to Disney Springs that any security is going to be more difficult to maintain a sort of closed environment than at City Walk.
And it's worth mentioning, just from a security standpoint, a few months ago, they stopped someone who had a firearm on them coming in from the parking garage at Disney Springs, and they didn't have a security checkpoint there. Like, a dog basically smelled that they had bullets. Like, I didn't know that was a thing.
They have security usually like at the bottom of the escalator, just sort of watching people, but there's no checkpoints. It's all... Right. You know, if there's a dog that smells it, or somebody, you know, one of the security officers notices somebody acting suspiciously or whatever, then they can stop you. But yeah, the woman with the barbecue grill and the hot dogs apparently wasn't acting suspiciously enough for them to stop her. So.
Well, that's the whole thing. Is it a missed opportunity? You've been closed for 2 months. You did the whole setup with temperature screening. So should this have been the time where you say, like, okay, everybody has to go to temperature screening. Let's all just like check. Let's make a checkpoint as well, just to make sure.
They haven't done anything, Axel. The castle's still half painted. They just dropped their paintbrushes one day and left.
If you want to talk about missed opportunity, I think this whole closure is an absolute missed opportunity for Disney to A, keep people employed, which would have helped greatly, and B, get things done without guests in the way. Like, imagine how much they could have done at Epcot without having to deal with guests and construction walls and things like that. They could have just taken all the construction walls down and bulldozed half of Future World, and they had 2 months to do it. So yeah, you want to talk about missed opportunity. I think this whole thing was a missed opportunity. They could have gotten so much work done while things were closed, and it would have been a great time to really accelerate some of these projects. But it doesn't make sense to me.
Maybe the people mover will work
outside. What's that?
Yeah. What? I said maybe the people mover will be repaired when the park's open. Maybe they did that. And it was still broken down when they closed, right?
But I mean, all this outdoor work, construction was never shut down in terms of, like, construction was always considered an essential business from the beginning of the shutdown. And outdoors in construction areas, it's pretty easy to social distance, plus you're outdoors. So I think they should have just kept going.
In the 2 months that everything has been closed, I think the first time that you're going to be back on Disney property, and I have to drive through it every day, the third hotel, like the Swan Dolphin, and then the third one, you'll be surprised how high that is and how much work.
Yeah, because that's third party. That's not Disney. Yeah, they kept going.
But what other theme park would say, like, okay, let's continue paying our employees and do construction? Who would do something like that? Huh. Yeah, maybe Universal, right?
Maybe Universal.
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, but no, I think the problem with security checks at Disney Springs is that there's just too many points of entry. Like, obviously a theme park, there's a single point of entry. There are obviously other points of entry backstage, but for the most part, all the guests funnel through one point. At Disney Springs, you've got all the different garages. You've got the walkways from Hotel Plaza Boulevard. You've got the walkway over from the Grapefruit Garage. You've got the parking lot out
Saratoga,
Cirque du Soleil. You've got the boats from Saratoga. You got the walkway from Saratoga all the way over near Rainforest. There's so many different points of entry.
But you would think that if you see a family of 12 walking around and wheeling like a little wheeler cart, because that was just seen in the picture, that somebody from security would say, like, excuse me, that seems a lot of things to bring into Disney Springs. Do you mind joining us to the site that we just take a look, just confirming that everything is okay? They would have seen the grill and they would have said, like, you're not allowed to do that here. Still, it's not like it's a weapon, but know that it's not allowed. she's wheeling a cart through Disney Springs,
Yeah.
and nobody says anything. And I'm like,
Yeah. No.
what else can you?
There clearly not enough security on staff right now at Disney Springs that something like that happened and it went on for so long. I'm just hoping that as more stores and restaurants open, that the number of security staff increases concomitantly, because that's definitely a problem. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I kind of hope that when they designed Disney Springs, it wasn't that long ago, they certainly could have designed in the ability to add security checkpoints at some point in the future, but there's still, I mean, it's not like it's impossible. I mean, even though there's like 9 or 10 different points of entry, you could still staff them all with security checkpoints. I mean, it's not impossible. But it would just be a big undertaking that Disney doesn't seem too anxious to do right now. But
Probably
it would
something will have to happen
make sense
before they
Well,
actually
yeah,
I mean,
something
you've got-
would have to happen. I mean, when you
Yeah.
look at Epcot, for example, Epcot had a highly porous zone entries region where you could have people coming in from almost any direction up and down that entire length of sidewalk that goes under the monorail station and everything. There was a time when none of those gates were there, none of those security things were, and you could just
Right.
walk right in from anywhere. And they physically altered everything after 9/11
Right.
to
well, they just
enable
put up
a
a big
security
fence.
zone. Right. And so they could do something like that at Disney Springs. As you say, it takes regional porosity to the utmost, because there are so many points of entry that are difficult to control. So you close them, you barricade them, you funnel people into certain places. It would be huge, and it would be difficult, and it would be a pain. But to Axel's point, at some point in time, they may be forced to do something like that. There's some, I think it's the Simon Malls. There's been chatter about security measures at, your neighborhood mall too, just for these types
Right.
of reasons. What if people
Or
tried to
the,
do something
Orlando
nefarious because
premium
of the,
outlets or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, an indoor mall might be easier because you can, in fact, lock the door and funnel people into one door. It's not an outdoor plaza like Disney Springs. But, I mean, I think that the world changed after 9/11. The world changed again after the 2008, 2009. And the world will change again after COVID, or during the downward slope of COVID. Who knows what it'll look like? We may end up with highly controlled access being the norm, even to places like Disney Springs. We don't know yet.
Well, I mean, Axel,
But it could happen.
you've experienced Disneyland Paris, where they actually do bag checks going into hotels, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Disneyland Paris had its share of dangerous things happening, like people trying to bring in firearms into the hotels. So now every hotel where you walk in, and that's not the site of, like, for those who don't know, Disneyland Paris, everything is connected to each other. You can walk to every hotel. So the side of the parks is still open, so you can still walk in, walk out. But the side from the parking lot is, there are security back checks. And like with x-rays and everything, so have them for Disney Village as well, x-ray and scanner. Same thing when you go into the parks from the parking lot, everything. So it's Disney can do it because they're doing it in Paris.
Right. So all of the hotels which are an entry point to the area, each have a bag scanner, and there's plenty of those hotels. What is there, like 8?
So now around Disney's, you have the Disneyland Hotel, and then you have the other 5 that are around there, like Davy Crockett is with the
so
bus.
there's 6.
But every hotel bus. So if you drive from your hotel to the parks with a bus, you're still going to have this back check. If you go,
Right.
I would say, like, I'm arriving. Well, if you walk, and if I would say I arrive early in the morning, I'm going to check in. So I'm going in, my bags are being checked at the hotel, and I walk to the parks, I'm going to be checked again at the entrance of Disney Village, which mainly is a downtown Disney district. So I'm going to be checked twice from parking until really going into the parks.
But that's because there's obviously things that you can carry into your hotel that you can't take into the park. So that makes sense.
Yes. Like glass bottles.
Right, right. But yeah, so I mean, there's an example where there's a lot of access points and they still do the checks. So it's absolutely doable. Like we said, there's a lot of access points at Disney Springs, but a bag check is absolutely doable.
Well, we drove by, today we went to the outlets just to go check, like, did something change at the Disney outlet? If you don't think that humanity is doomed already, go to the outlets on a Memorial Day weekend, and we're doomed, especially in front of the Gucci store. We're doomed. But driving home, we drove past TTC, the Polynesian stuff. So all the construction is nicely done, all is new at TTC. And I'm wondering, like, they did all that work, and still, it's the same for Animal Kingdom, it's the same for Epcot. They do invest in changing the whole security situation and the whole back check. Why don't you invest right away? And this is before COVID. This is before the financial issues, before anything. They could have done that. Those works had started before anything of this was happening, before anybody of us knew that this ever could happen. Why, if you go through the pain of remodeling and redoing your security zone, why don't you put those scanners, those X-ray machines, why don't you put them there? It's so much easier than an old man with a little stick going through your back.
Yep, and that's exactly what I wrote
it.
in my editorial that we published about a week ago now. So yeah, no, I went through that whole argument in my article. Yeah, it boggles my mind. But anyway, all right. So let's. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention. So, do you think there's a difference at City Walk, because City Walk doesn't open till 4 o'clock? Disney Springs opens at like 10 or 11. So, do you think there's a difference too, where at City Walk it's later in the day, it's starting to cool off, masks aren't going to be as big of a problem, whereas at Disney Springs you're there at high noon and it's hot. I think that may play a role in the number of people complying with the mask rules between the two different locations as well.
What is the
it was 94 degrees at Disney Springs when I went to lunch. I mean, that's,
yeah.
I don't know what it was the week before when City Walk opened. And I don't know that City Walk has maintained that same level of respect for the request for masks and social distancing. But it was very, very hot at Disney Springs on Wednesday and on Friday.
I mean, for me, it's an easy solution. It's in the morning, it's cooler. So if you want to go and you want to enjoy, you don't want to have the hassle of your mask, go in the morning, go in the evening. It's open until 10 p.m. I know it gets hot, but unfortunately, this is going to be the near future for the parks as well. And if I see what's happening only in Disney Springs, then I fear what we are going to see in the parks, because it's not like Disney Springs where you can go for a few hours and then head off. When you take the trip down there, you are not going to go back in a few hours. You're going to stay there for the whole day. So that scares me for what's about to come.
I predict there will be fights in the parks between guests, because if security's not enforcing this, some of the guests will be shouting at people, "Put on your mask." You know,
they'll take it into their own hands. Somebody in the chat said that so the Florida's governor approved Universal's reopening plan, but apparently did not approve Legoland's reopening plan. And he said maybe the difference between those two was that Universal had a mask requirement and Legoland did not, and that's why their reopening plan did not get approved. I haven't been following the Legoland news. Do you guys know anything about that?
But no, it would seem it seems strange. I don't know about Legoland, so just to be clear, I don't know about Legoland, but I do know that Fun Spot reopened with a non-requirement to wear a mask, and they are open. So if that would be the only thing, then there's something wrong with Fun Spot, because they do not require to wear a mask.
Well,
and even if the television station was there,
no one's there.
The employees weren't wearing a mask.
I mean, there is something wrong with Fun Spot. There's something wrong with the people that go to Fun Spot.
there was something with Legoland, but I'm looking at an article anyway from Fox 13 Tampa Bay that says, yeah, the state has approved Legoland to open on June 1st. So at one point they did. I recall them saying, "Hey, Legoland wants to open June 1st, but the governor said not so fast. Want to talk about it?" So I bet this article seems to say that the state approved it.
So maybe they came back with a revised plan and got approval. I guess I don't know. It's something we'll have to look into maybe. But yeah, June. So if Legoland is open on June 1st, that's coming up at the same time as Universal. So, let's wrap up with Disney Springs. There are more and more stores and restaurants are opening every day. The Disney-owned and operated stores, such as World of Disney, are going to open on Wednesday, May 27th, and I'm sure there'll be a number of WDWNT staff there to cover that. That's a much bigger deal than I think, a handful of third-party vendors opening when actual Disney-owned stores open. I know Legoland hasn't opened yet, but they're doing curbside pickup of orders. So it'll be interesting, especially Legoland. It'll be interesting, or not, I'm sorry, not Legoland, the Lego store. The Lego store. What would you do curbside pickup at Legoland? The Lego store at Disney Springs is not open, but they are doing curbside pickup for orders. It will be actually really interesting to see how things are happening at the Lego store when they do open, because obviously they have that huge play area and they have all those statues made with Legos that people like to touch. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there too. But yeah, so stay tuned on Wednesday. Wednesday is going to be a big day. WDWNT's coverage will probably start at like 9 a.m. with a traffic jam to get into the parking garage at Disney Springs. And we'll be going all day. So we'll see what happens there. Now, so I guess thinking about the difference between City Walk and Disney Springs. And City Walk opening a week before Disney Springs opened. Was a week, I think, wasn't it? It was almost a week.
It was. It was like 6 days.
Yeah,
City Walk opened on a Thursday, and Disney Springs opened on the following Wednesday.
Right. So it will be interesting to see what happens when Universal opens the parks. Well, actually, so it's just Islands of Adventure that's opening on June 1st. Is that right? Universal
June
Studios,
1st,
Florida.
We have no, June 1st is not for the general public. The general public is June
1st is for Universal team members. But that's still only Islands of Adventure. It's not Universal Studios, Florida. It's just the Islands of Adventure park.
But the 5th is supposed to be all the parks, right?
Yes.
Right, so June 1st and 2nd is Universal team members only, like a soft opening. June 3rd and 4th is annual pass holders and other special people, if you get a special invite, I guess. And then June 5th, it's open to the general public, obviously with lower capacity and, all the social distancing, mask requirements are in place at Universal, so it is both theme parks that are opening on June 3rd. At least that's what the little thing at the bottom of the screen says down there.
Even better, all three. They're opening Volcano Bay. I mean,
that's right. They are opening Volcano Bay.
Chlorine and bromine.
I mean, Well, yeah, I mean, to be honest, if I had to go somewhere and be around a whole bunch of people, a water park with like way over chlorinated water all over the place, that's going to kill the COVID virus very easily. That is probably the safest place. Also, think about it. You're in the pool. You can't have a mask on while you're in the pool swimming. So
You drown.
I'm assuming there's not going to be a mask requirement there. I mean, maybe they'll say, please have a mask on like at the restaurant, the food locations or whatnot. But even then, you can't have the mask on while you're eating. So all you people that want to go to a theme park and don't want to wear a mask, the water parks are where it's at.
There is a requirement to wear a mask, though. So basically, if you follow the rules, if you would lay yourself down in one of those beds and just want to take a nap, you are supposed to wear a mask. If you follow the rules down to the letter, you would be required to wear a mask from going from your bed to a slide, but then not on the slide itself, which makes it hard because like you're going to take
where you're
that
going to put the mask.
Indeed. So I think there it will be a bit of juggling with everything. If I'm going to lay down and rest for a bit and there's nobody around me, I'm not going to wear the mask. Like the first thing is social distancing. If you're far enough from everybody, you're good. The mask is not going to change anything. I think it will probably be like how many people will be there and how crowded would it be.
Yeah. I mean, Volcano Bay has a pretty low capacity anyway, right? Like it's not a huge park. It doesn't have a huge capacity. So at 25% capacity, it's got to look pretty sparse. But
and they also don't they have like a wristband you wear that gives you a reservation for your ride, so you're not queued up right behind people.
That's right.
You topple your way through.
Yep. Yeah. So I think, but certainly, I think the water parks are going to make sense. Like I said, just because, if you're in the pool and swimming and then you happen to touch your face, that virus that could have been on your hands is not going to be alive after your hands have been dipped into the chlorinated water. So it's essentially equivalent to washing your hands every time you go into one of the water pools or slides or whatnot. So I think you're going to be pretty safe at a water park versus a theme park.
Definitely.
But, yeah. So
Jason, coming back on your June 1st, it's like Islands of Adventure and a soft opening. And I do get it, so they can try a few things out. But on the other hand, if you look on the nicer side of this whole story, Hagrid's opened with his fair share of issues. Then you had bees, so there's been quite some many issues with that ride, and not all the team members were able to enjoy it. So I see it like that. You have 2 days that your park, yet you can run your park for your team members so they can enjoy the newest rides in your park. So it's a nice thing to do tryout, but I think
I don't think they're doing
extra.
it for the team members to enjoy the newest rides, though. I mean,
I don't know.
Yeah, the team members are going to go on rides, and they'll probably all line up for Hagrid's. That's fine. That's not why they're doing the 2-day preview on June 1st and 2nd.
I'm not saying that's the sole reason, but it gives them the opportunity, because they could have done Universal Studios, which is the bigger park. Still, I think that's an extra. And then for the team members I know, they consider it as like, this is our chance to go and enjoy the new rides, at least for us. And I'm not saying that's
I guess
reason.
if you haven't been on the new ride, then that makes sense. But I mean, clearly, not every team member can do it because some of them have to work. So it's not every team member that's going to be able to do that. But I mean, clearly, I think they're definitely looking to see how social distancing is going to work inside of a theme park. I think they're looking to see how, like, capacity when there's an X number of people in the park. Does it feel crowded? Is social distancing more difficult when you get above a certain number of people? Lines for restaurants and things like that. How bad do the lines get? If people are 6 feet apart in the lines, you know, does it cause traffic jams in the walkways? I think those are the kinds of things that they're going to be looking for in order to understand how it's going to work when they open it to the general public.
I think they're only going to see that once they open for their pass holders, because, like, honestly, even with team members, if your employer says, like, come back, we're going to do like this test day, you know, these are the rules: wear your mask, keep 6 feet. Those team members aren't going to do that. They know, like, okay, it's our job, so we're going to obey the rules. It's different than you have random guests just there with a whole family and kids running around and people just not respecting the rules. So they still have their fair share of surprises once they're going to open for the public.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. And actually, what's going to be really interesting when these parks do reopen is the general ratio of kids to adults. Like, I know that there's plenty of people out there with kids that said, I'm not going to bring my kids to a theme park until, you know, they're vaccinated or whatnot. You know, and I'm coming down in a couple of weeks, and I'm not bringing my kids. So I'm interested to see. This may turn out to be almost like an adults only experience for the next couple of months, maybe until things start to really get better, or a vaccine comes along, or something along those lines. Not that adults are any better behaved than kids in a lot of cases, but
the kids didn't start grilling hot dogs at Disney Springs.
No, the kids were eating the hot dogs. I don't think adults are necessarily better behaved than the kids, but they're a lot less screaming and meltdowns. You know, there's people swimming in the ponds at Epcot, but at least they're not having a meltdown while they're doing it.
It's like this morning as we went to the outlets and we went to get a donut at Krispy Kreme, and you see a kid like touching the window and putting his hands on it, and just his mom, of course, with her face mask on her chin, because that's how you wear a face mask, so you just know, didn't say anything. When we went to the outlets, plenty of people there with kids and not respecting any social distance, of course, not wearing a mask. I think
the outlets don't require a mask, right?
They don't. No. They advise it. They don't require it. There are shops that do require it, where you go in and you don't have a mask, they're going to give you one. But still, even like there were still people with kids, and then once there was a line to go into that store, social distance is something that they've never heard of, because they were so close to each other. Like, you walk by, and you say, whoa, this is no distance at all.
Yeah. So, speaking of the mask requirement, you know, and you saying how people were wearing the mask on their chin, I was in Costco the other day, and there was a father and a son, and they had masks on. One was a Darth Vader mask, and one was a Stormtrooper mask. It was like the full Halloween, full-size head mask. That was their mask. So it was really amusing, and of course that, you know, they had their face covered. It was legit. So it's not like they weren't allowed in. Costco will not let people in without a mask, but they had a mask. And I just say that because somebody in the chat said this whole thing about people wearing masks is going to make it interesting when Halloween comes around. But yeah, that was kind of funny. although the rules say no masks. The rules say no costumes. But what about a Halloween mask? Well, I don't know. But anyway, so yeah, I guess we know that there's going to be limited capacity at Universal. Reservations are not required, unlike Shanghai. When Shanghai opened a couple weeks ago, you had to have a reservation for a particular day. I'm guessing that Universal is just expecting, and maybe this is based on the opening of City Walk, they're expecting the crowds to be relatively light. And so, it's going to be, well, we have 25% capacity, and when we hit that, we have to close the gates. And, we've advertised that. We've told people that. They show up, we're just going to have to turn them away. But they're hoping not to, really even get to that point, I guess. But we'll just have to see what happens. Whether this reservation's not required turned out to be a good idea or not.
But
what do you guys
Jason,
think?
do you think it's a good idea to have the reservations? Because I'm just going to take the things that recently happened on Shop Disney, where bots buy all the stuff and Tom is left empty-handed. Now, Same thing we have friends over in Anaheim. They live really close to the park. Her parents go to Disneyland just to walk around. It's not like they want to do many rides. Right. That's their daily walk.
Sure.
They go there just to walk.
People watch. Yep.
They're not the youngest anymore. So what if those people do not succeed in getting their reservation, but some kind of bot does, or some kind of Disney blogger, and he sells the places. So he sells oh, here you go, here's a reservation, or anything else. What if those people could not go in?
So I'm imagining, I don't know the exact logistics of how it worked at Shanghai, but obviously Shanghai Disneyland is a very different park than Walt Disney World and even Disneyland to some extent. It's much more, I'd say, akin to a fun spot where people are going to go there for the day. They're not going to book a hotel. They're not going to book, they're not going to buy a 6-day park hopper. Because there's only one park at Shanghai anyway. But so a vast majority of the people that go to Shanghai Disneyland are going for the day. And so to make them have a reservation is basically you made them purchase a ticket for a designated day ahead of time, whereas normally they would have just shown up and bought the ticket that day. I think the difference is that at Disney and at Universal too, you've got tons of locals who are pass holders, who are going to be, interested in coming on any particular day. And then you've got visitors, you've got hotel guests. And we talked about this with the limited capacity. We talked about, are hotel guests going to get priority to enter the parks, just like they do on holiday crowded weeks when the park reaches capacity, but hotel guests are still allowed in while the day guests and non-resort guests are turned away. How's that going to work? Obviously, we know that Universal's not opening their hotels on June 3rd when they reopen the park, so that's kind of a moot point, at least for now.
They don't own their hotels.
Well, yeah,
Lowe's owns all those hotels.
I mean, Lowe's could certainly has the option to open the hotels, I would think, right? I don't know if they have to submit a different reopening plan that involves the hotels to the governor or whatever, but I think the question is that the problem is that the people, essentially at Shanghai, when you had to make a reservation, you had to put money out because you had to buy the ticket. At Disney, you have plenty of people with passes, annual passes, that could make a reservation and then just not show up. And that doesn't happen, that wouldn't or didn't happen. It doesn't happen at Shanghai because there's so few people with annual passes at Shanghai. And so honestly, I think it's the annual pass holders that are going to put the wrench in the works in terms of making reservations for a particular day, because You know, either they're going to have to set up strict rules like you can make a reservation for this day, you can only make one reservation in the next 7 days, or you can only make a reservation for this far in advance, or you know, you have to pay a $10 deposit. Or if you don't show up for your reservation, you can't make another one. I mean, that's the problem, is there's way too many pass holders that that would make reservations and then certainly potentially not use them. And this is exactly what happened with restaurant reservations years and years ago, that you could make like 6 different priority seating reservations for restaurants, and then whatever one you happened to be in the mood to go, you used, and all the other ones went unused, and there was no recourse. And you know, there were so many reservations that didn't get used, and walk-ups couldn't get seated and stuff. So I think that's the problem that Universal and Disney are going to face if they required reservations. Now, granted,
and then you get there
when
and you
buy,
fail the temperature test.
Well, that's a different question altogether, too, right?
Yeah. But you jump through all these hoops. You get a reservation, you buy the ticket, you go all the way to the park, and then
you're going to get even more annoyed, right?
Yeah, then you're going to be really upset.
But I mean, if you go on the Disney website to buy a 3-day ticket or whatever, you have to pick which days they're going to be. So, you know, there is some sort of that system in place, but it's really only for off-property guests who are buying passes where they specify which days they're going to be using the passes. So it certainly doesn't account for everybody. So I think, I think based on City Walk's opening, I think Universal is probably thinking that there's not going to be that many people coming. And certainly it's easy enough to, when, you know, if they do hit some capacity limit, it's easy enough to turn people away at the parking garages and say, sorry, we're full. I mean, that's what Magic Kingdom does. Magic Kingdom will turn people away at the toll plaza to get into the parking lot. Because the first people that are turned away when Magic Kingdom hits capacity are the off-property and day guests who aren't staying at a resort. So, you know, that's easy enough for Universal to do. It's easy enough for Disney to do as well, for the most part. But my guess is that Universal is not thinking they're going to really hit these capacity numbers. Maybe the first day they will, because all the bloggers are going. But you know, I don't know that they're expecting to hit those capacity numbers every day. But, you know, we'll see. I'm sure they'll be able to adapt if they do. And
Jason, I think so. Bloggers will not go the first day unless they have an invitation from Universal. But they will say, we're not going to go, and then they're going to have a media pass, and they're still going to go. But that's aside. I'm not pointing at anybody here.
I know who you're talking about.
I do think that it could be a good thing for Universal. Just imagine that Disney says, like, okay, we're doing the reservations. And as you said, you're coming down, you plan to come down to Disney, and you can get into the parks. But you still plan to come down. And what if you come down and you do not stay in a Disney hotel, and you're there and it's at capacity, or you didn't have your reservation? Well, you just go to Universal, and Universal picks those people that do not get into Disney. So it could be like a mastermind thing, and saying like, yes, they did not do reservations, and people who will not get into Disney will therefore go to Universal, or might go to Universal, and they will have that income.
Yep.
I don't know.
I know when I come down, I'm coming down on June 16th. It's still not clear whether Disney will be open. We just saw earlier today that there are people with June 13th, which is a Saturday. June 13th restaurant reservations are getting canceled, and they're getting notifications that June 13th restaurant reservations are getting canceled, but June 14th are not. So that's Sunday. It starts the next week. I'm coming down on Tuesday the 16th. I have restaurant reservations on Tuesday the 16th that haven't been canceled yet. I have a hotel reservation on Tuesday the 16th. that I haven't heard anything about any cancellation. So we know Disney does like a 1 week rolling cancellation. So it may be another week till we determine what's going to happen with my June 16th reservation. But we've already decided if Universal's open, then we're going to come and we'll go to Universal, even if Disney's not open. I mean, it's not really a big deal for us to it's a great opportunity because I don't get to go to Universal that much. I mean, I have a Disney annual pass, but I don't have a Universal annual pass. So, if Disney wasn't open and Universal was, I'd be excited to go to Universal. I'd be happy. Get to do something a little different. But I think...
Yeah, and that's the thing. How much longer
Disney,
will...
Yeah. How much longer will Disney stay closed?
Yes.
Yeah, and that actually is a very nice segue into our next topic for tonight, and that is why is Disney letting Universal take the lead on the reopening instead of blazing their own trail or doing their own thing? And like I said, we'll be happy going to Universal if Disney's closed. So, Disney needs to hear that message. Obviously, Disney is a much bigger place than Universal, and as we saw with City Walk, there are many more entrance points to Disney Springs, which complicates certain things. But Disney overall is a much bigger place. What would happen if they only open one park instead of 2 or 3 or 4? We don't know what's happened to the water parks. So, in my mind, Disney always has, up until, 5 or 10 years ago, Disney's always blazed trails on the theme park front. It seems they're taking a back seat to Universal in this case. And a lot of people are saying, well, they're just going to see what Universal does, and if it works out well or doesn't work out well, they're going to, then they can adapt their plans and open a week or two later. That's a fair assessment. Maybe that's what's happening, but it's not like Disney said, it's not like Disney in 1988 said, oh, Universal's building a studios park in Orlando. Let's sit back and wait and see how they do, and then if it works out well, we'll build a Disney MGM Studios. That's not what happened. Michael Eisner said, oh crap, Universal's building a park. Let's get one going and open it before they do. To take the wind out of their sails, and that's exactly what Michael Eisner did. And so it's, Disney is not usually one to sit back and see what the competition does before they decide what they're going to do and what's best for them. So a couple of things enter my mind at this point. Certainly one is that simply because Universal did not stop paying their team members and Disney furloughed thousands and thousands of cast members, it's much easier for Universal to make these decisions and make them quickly and have things implemented quickly because all of their people are still on the payroll and can come back at a moment's notice. So that's number one in my mind, is that it's not that Disney's letting Universal sit back or it's not that Disney's letting Universal take the lead while they sit back and see what happens. It's that Universal has an enormous competitive advantage and an enormous first mover advantage in this case because they have all of their team members still on the payroll and can call them back at any time. And we talked about this weeks and weeks ago when the furloughs happened, over a month ago now. How long is it going to take Disney to get these people back and get staffing to a point where they can open a park? Maybe Disney wants to reopen on June 3rd, and they can't because they can't get enough cast members back and working in order to do that. June 3rd is like a little over a week and a half away. It certainly is possible that Disney just cannot physically get the cast members in place and ready in order to open a park on June 3rd. I mean, there's a number of other possible reasons too. Like maybe they do want to sit back and see what Universal does. Maybe they think this is going to be extremely difficult to do, and that they don't know how a lot of these things are going to work out. So they want to see what happens at Universal. Maybe they think that the people that come to Disney World are morons and aren't going to listen to the policies of wearing masks. So they want to see what happens at Universal. Although City Walk gave them a little taste of that. And certainly at Disney Springs, if they're not enforcing the mask rules, then what difference does it make if there's a rule about masks when they're not going to enforce the rules anyway? I mean, that's a problem. So, you know,
There's
what?
a few things. Like,
Yep.
first of all, like as you said, back in the days, it was taking the wind out of the sails. This is not like who is going to take the most profit. This is about times are changing, who can lead by innovation. And it hurts me by saying that, but a company as the Walt Disney Company today cannot lead by innovation. They do not take the lead.
For sure.
They do not innovate. And one of the reasons for that is that a bigger part of management, middle management, has been furloughed as well. So how do you want them to work on projects to innovate and to get people back in the parks if they're at home? On the other hand, like, oh, we'll see what Universal is doing. They have a park, like Shanghai is ongoing. They have the best practices there, although it's a smaller park. Still, they're doing it. They can take the best practices from that park. Tokyo is thinking about reopening, and they're working on it. So they don't share best practices, and then they don't have the innovation to lead. And that's where Universal takes the lead right now. And as you said, it's easier for Universal to say, like, they kept everybody on payroll. They paid them at 80% of what they normally earn. So Universal has nothing to lose by saying we are going to open our 3 parks and we're going to pay our team members back at 100%. That 20% will not, they're going to make that in opening the 3 parks. Disney is going from 0 to 100. And I'm not sure at this point, especially for a park like Epcot, in how far they are already calculating and saying, we are doing a better deal by staying closed than getting people, cast members back to not earn the money that we put in it. And that's the point where I get afraid. Everything is about the money.
It is.
That's what's scared. That's what's scary.
Yep. Very well said, Axel. Very well said.
I think it's worth pointing out too that there could be a false start, and so while Universal is a canary in a coal mine, they can ramp up and ramp down faster, and they're a little more agile. They don't rely on like college program labor and international programs and things like that. So training to ramp up and get going at Disney, and then let's say there's a false start and cases of COVID-19 increase in Florida again, and we're kind of back to maybe scaling back parks or closing parks again. It doesn't really hurt Universal because they're paying the people anyway, like Axel said. And Disney, you know, they have their costs to ramp up and ramp down would be probably a lot higher.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at the thing as a whole, because at the root of Disney, I think is an abundance of caution, as they would say. They're very cautious about being on the leading edge of technology for rides and entertainment and things like that. I think we've seen that. They've done some cool stuff, but it's been slow in coming. I think they were financially cautious, as Axel was alluding to, and when they furloughed everybody. And I think they're being financially and probably an overabundance of safety in delaying their opening. I don't see a parallel to Disney World in Universal necessarily, and maybe not most of the Disney parks worldwide, maybe Tokyo. But Disney World is a massive city-sized theme park system, and it is going to be very, very difficult. There's probably, if Universal Orlando has 1,000 inputs to their modeling and decision making on when they want to open. Disney probably has 100,000 inputs and a much more complex model. So it's going to take them longer. Yes, they'll take inputs from other places that have opened, maybe even FunSpot. But I think that there are some parallels and there are some data that you can get from the other parks that are open. But by and large, Disney World is somewhat on its own when it comes to the decision point of when do we open, how do we open, and who do we let in once we do open. Because it's like the other places in some respects, but not really like anywhere else either.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Rich.
The other question is who's actually making those decisions? That's another thing that we don't know, is who's making the decision about Disney World reopening. Obviously, they have all these models and analytics and inputs, but who looks at the outcome of that model and decides, yes, it's time to reopen?
Right.
Somebody, we're actually
determined. Is this business strategy people you're talking about, Jason? Are you talking about business strategy, or are you talking about risk management and insurance?
I have no idea.
Medical decisions?
I have no idea who's going to make that call. But
Who is the CEO
Kevin
anyway?
has reminded me. Kevin has reminded me that we're well past time to take a break here, so we're going to throw it to commercial break. I'm going to go grab a drink, and we'll come back and we'll continue this discussion because I think it's getting a little bit heated at this point. We'll see what happens. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
4 panelists, 30 minutes, 1 week in Disney Parks news. This is Parks Center. On Parks Center, the panel and I cover the top 7 Disney Park stories of the past week. From attraction news to transportation scandals to new food and merchandise, we'll cover it all in 30 minutes or less. You can watch us stream live every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. at www.intunes.com, watch episodes on demand at youtube.com/wdwnt, or subscribe to the audio version of the show on your favorite podcast app.
Dreamfinders is WDW News Today's podcast all about the creative culture surrounding Disney parks. Authors, Imagineers, dancers, actors, photographers, filmmakers, and a whole lot more have all stopped by to chat about how Disney has inspired their artistic work.
But I still remember sitting in conference tables and looking across at Michael and Jeffrey Katzenberg and this sort of little 6-year-old inside of me going, what in heaven's name is going on here?
And we're off and running, and Tony needs someone to lay it out for him. And there's no architect available. So the next thing I know, I'm laying out the pavilion.
I got to tell you, I have not enjoyed a podcast so much. It's just a warm conversation, and a warm and intelligent conversation, which you don't find that often in podcasts.
Dreamfinders. Episodes drop every other Tuesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcatcher.
WDW News Tonight is our weekly comedy show combining the news of the week, comedy segments, thoughtful discussions, insane characters, parody commercials, games, and more. Watch live on Thursdays at 9 p.m. and become a Wigs member to get access to a bonus post show. Watch WDW News Tonight episodes anytime and live on YouTube, or get the audio-only version on iTunes and other podcast services.
Welcome back to Pressing Issues. We're right in the midst of a discussion about Universal's reopening and Disney Springs reopening and when the Disney parks are going to reopen. Welcome back to the panel. Hope you guys had a second to get a drink. I'll also say for everyone who watched the commercial for WDW News Tonight, we have about twice as many people watching this show as WDW News Tonight, and Tom is really pissed at me at this point. So I'd implore anybody who's watching, if you don't watch WDW News Tonight on Thursday nights, you really should, just to get Tom off my back. But anyway.
Do you need a little violin, Jason?
I do, and also, I also think we need to get Ron Schneider to listen to this show because he said, intelligent conversation in podcasting isn't all that common, but I think we have some pretty intelligent conversation on this podcast. So maybe Ron Schneider is one of our listeners. I don't know. Hopefully, but anyways, so yeah, we were just talking about. Universal opening their parks on June 3rd to pass holders and June 5th to the general public, and Disney just opened Disney Springs a week after Universal opened City Walk. They haven't made an announcement for park reopenings at all yet. We know they canceled dining reservations through June 13th at this point, and so yeah. And I think a lot of the conversation has been that Universal's just more agile when it comes to reopening. They have all their team members still on the payroll. It's easier for them to make decisions with a smaller set of parks and resorts. They can sort of ramp up and ramp down as necessary. Disney has furloughed a large majority of their cast members, and they send all the international program and college program cast members home. So all of those cast are out of the possibility for returning to work. We do know that the college program cast members are coming back in the fall semester, like August. That's still happening, so it could be the case that they're not going to ramp up until August, maybe late July or August. But certainly, go ahead.
That might not be for all the parks. Still, the majority of Epcot is by international and college program. Still, they have the opportunity to choose their parks. It's different for Universal because you're paying everybody anyways. And then if I see the bigger picture, how would I feel if I was working at Islands of Adventure and my coworker that works at Volcano Bay can stay home with 80% of his pay and I have to go to work? Then this is a better deal, and it's fair to everyone that they say, like, okay, we're allowed to open, so we're going to open everything. Disney can still choose. They have 4 parks to choose of. Like, are we going to open 1 park, 2, 3, or 4? They have the chance, and they can still see how it works out. But for me,
that's what I
was just going to say, for me, we were on the verge of buying annual passes to Universal. So we are Platinum Plus pass holders in Disney, and we talked about that like months ago, saying like, okay, maybe we're going to downgrade from the Platinum Plus, and then with that money or with that bit of money, we'll have some payments for Universal passes. Once I knew that Universal was opening June 1st, I went on the computer and I bought Universal passes so that other of our friends, and I think a lot of people went to their computer and bought tickets or a pass. So like, Universal is taking a lead on Disney, something that Disney always, well, back in the days, was afraid of and always wanted to stay ahead of the game. They are losing that game right now every day.
Yep, they are. And
I don't think that's fair. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say I agree with Axel. I want to hear why you don't think it's fair, Eric.
I don't think it's necessarily fair because the stakes are a lot lower for Universal than they are for Disney. Their revenue is not nearly as impacted by the parks closing as because they're owned by Comcast, and all Disney's revenue is drying up. But also,
nothing they have Disney Plus.
But Disney carries the flag for tourism. Disney carries the flag for tourism in Central Florida. So airline executives aren't scrambling all their people to start scheduling flights because Universal is opening up. Right? They're waiting to see what Disney's going to do. So if Disney opens up and screws this up somehow, the stakes are a lot higher. They're going to carry all the blame, all the media. People start getting COVID-19 in Central Florida. It's going to be Disney's fault. It's not going to be Universal's fault. If Disney panics and opens just because Universal's open, this shouldn't be a business strategic decision. This should be about safety and health. And I don't know. And just another thing, I think I would like to see, because we don't have the internationals and we don't have the CPs right now, it's going to be probably a long time before Disney Cruise Line opens. They have a lot of employees here in Central Florida. I would love to see them kind of, if they were willing to be offered positions on a temporary basis to fill in and staff some of these things if they do open. I'm getting way ahead of myself because I was just talking about safety and kind of Disney being more measured in their response, I guess.
There's tons of people in the chat that agree with you, Eric. Two things I was going to say. First is that when I come down in June, if Disney's not open, I'm absolutely going to go buy an annual pass to Universal because I'm going to be there for like 5 days, and that just makes financial sense versus 5-day tickets. But yeah, so for sure, if Disney's not open, I have a Disney annual pass, but I'm going to end up buying a Universal one too. So that's that. As Axel was saying, yeah, I think Universal is going to get a huge bounce right at the beginning with all of the people that would go to Disney but otherwise cannot. As far as what you're saying, Eric, I mean, clearly there is the potential for all of this to sort of backfire and infections start drastically increasing, and the governor says, all right, we got to shut it all down again. That's very true. I think, whether it's likely to happen, I don't know. I mean, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, of course.
No, but you've already lost a few billion. You've already lost a few billion and taken out some loans and all this stuff. Why not give it a couple weeks and see what happens to Universal? It could blow up in Universal's face and Disney benefits. And if Disney panics and opens because Universal's opening, it's still going to be on them if things go bad. So I just think it's a better way to.
I think you're right, though. I think Disney has more to lose by reopening than Universal does. And so it's a much bigger risk for Disney to reopen than for Universal. But, devil's advocate here, why can't Disney just open the Magic Kingdom? I mean, that's essentially equivalent to Universal opening one of their two parks. What if Disney would just say, all right, we're just going to open the Magic Kingdom, and we're only going to open it to annual pass holders? And you have to wear a mask, and that's it. That's the baby steps approach that I think obviously that sort of approach is not going to get all the airlines to immediately start flying to Orlando again, but maybe that's the baby steps approach that makes sense. Maybe that's what they need to do.
Maybe you open Epcot first because people will leave their masks on for all the dust that's from all the construction around there.
No, if you open Epcot first, nobody will go.
Yeah.
But I mean, so you've got, and I also think, based on the fact that there's not going to be any CPs or international program cast members until at least August, you're not going to have a full reopening of Walt Disney World until at least August, because you just are not going to have the staff. Even August may be too soon to be 100% staffed. But they could certainly do it slowly. I mean, I think there's enough cast members that are chomping at the bit to come back that they could say, all right, we're going to open just the Magic Kingdom and just annual pass holders, and it's going to be capped at 25%, and do that and learn from that. I mean, it's much easier to learn from something internally than to send spies over to Universal and see what's going on over there. So if Disney wanted to just open the Magic Kingdom, they certainly could. I mean, Universal's not opening any hotels yet. So the question is, when are Disney hotels going to open? We don't know. We know reservations are canceled at least into June. I don't know how far into June at this point.
It could legitimately be
16th.
They could legitimately be full of NBA players by then.
Well, I
actually
don't think every hotel.
possible.
I mean, we talked weeks and weeks ago when the secure circuit protocol was leaked. We talked about how the Magic Kingdom was going to be the first park to open, and the only hotels to open were going to be the Magic Kingdom hotels, and that's specifically why I booked my reservation at the Polynesian as opposed to like the Animal Kingdom Lodge or whatnot. But I think if you're going to put, I mean, that whole NBA thing is going to happen. It's either going to happen at Pop Century or the All-Stars, simply because those are big enough to manage. They all have exterior doors, which is going to be beneficial for the prevention of spreading of any virus, because you open your door and you're immediately outside. You're not in a crowded hallway with a bunch of other people. And plus, Pop Century's super close to Wide World of Sports, so that makes sense to me too. Or even Caribbean Beach, for that matter, is right there next to Wide World of Sports. So I don't think they're going to put NBA players up at the Polynesian and the Grand Floridian. I think those are going to.
I don't think they're putting them at the All-Stars.
Jason, I don't think they're going to put them in a value resort. If you ask me, we've been talking about how long will Epcot be closed. And the longer I speak with different people, we're like, okay, we're going to see Epcot reopening October, November, somewhere for the holidays. Wait it out until everybody's back. So if they're going to wait for a later opening, they could put those NBA players in deluxe resorts like the Boardwalk Beach Club and have the Boardwalk for them.
I think the Boardwalk and the Beach Club are likely because, we talked about this several weeks ago, that the Boardwalk and the Beach Club are probably going to be among the last hotels to open if Epcot doesn't open when the rest of the parks do. So, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I thought Caribbean Beach or Pop because they're very close to Wide World of Sports. The Boardwalk makes total sense to me.
And they have the Boardwalk and I think to go eat, sense. Drink, whatever.
And it also makes complete sense to not open Epcot at the same time as everything else. I mean, we talked about the missed opportunity of getting a jump start on all this construction by keeping the construction going during the park's closure. But yeah, if they keep Epcot closed even after the other parks open, they're going to have that opportunity to do a lot of construction too. So that makes sense to me. Maybe they're going to keep Epcot closed until until Food and Wine starts. Food and wine is such a popular thing, and it's such a moneymaker when they charge $8 for like one scallop. They'll be back in the they'll be back in the black real quick with that. Maybe Epcot will reopen in time for Flower and Garden. We'll see.
Jason, there have been a lot of questions. I just saw somebody in the chat as well about what happens to the annual passes. And then I'm wondering, what are they going to do? Are they going to do the same thing as Shanghai does? Are they going to extend your pass
if they don't open
as long as everything is not open?
Yeah, until everything is open. So here's my thought. Obviously, with annual passes, Disney's giving you two options. One is to just extend the pass extend the expiration by the number of days the parks were closed. And two is to basically keep the same expiration date but get a prorated credit for the number of days the parks were closed. In terms of what happens when only one or two of the parks open, I think my guess is that that's going to start the clock. Now, in Shanghai, it didn't start the clock because Shanghai needed reservations. And so I think they legitimately couldn't say to people, well, your annual pass is valid because the parks are open, even if you couldn't get a reservation. I think that would have caused an uproar. If Disney opens and does not require reservations for the parks, then I think the clock on your pass will start ticking. If they do require reservations to get in, then maybe the clock won't start ticking. But even so, as long as the reservations are open to annual pass holders, my guess is with the current state of the Disney company today, they're going to want that clock to start ticking as soon as possible. So even if Epcot's not open, if the other...
be weird for people like Tom that have the pass that's good like everywhere, not just in Florida.
Well, yeah, because it's going to be a different expiry date in California than Florida. Yeah, I think they'll make an adjustment for that somehow. But I would say even if Epcot's not open, the other 3 parks are open, the clock's definitely going to start ticking on your pass at that point. There were also some things in the chat about Boardwalk and Beach Club being DVC. You can not all of the Boardwalk and not all of the Beach Club are DVC. So obviously, yes, putting the NBA players up in the DVC is not going to happen, but it can certainly happen in the Boardwalk inside of the Boardwalk, which is not DVC, and it can happen in the Beach Club hotel that's not the villas, which is plenty big, and the Yacht Club is plenty big too. There's no DVC.
I think they need about 1,000. They would need about 1,000 rooms. Does that sound right? I think there's about 1,000. Between 750 and 1,000 people they would have to put up for the rest of the season. They would have to put up.
And I mean, somebody can look up quick how many rooms are at the Boardwalk, or the Beach Club or the Yacht Club. I think you have way more than 1,000 rooms that are not DVC rooms at those 3 resorts. So, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, something like Coronado too, or Caribbean Beach has plenty of rooms to put to take up 1,000 rooms. But in any case,
just the Boardwalk.
There's plenty of places.
Just the Boardwalk Inn is 280 rooms approximately, and that's the Boardwalk Inn. That's not the villas. So that's not that many.
Well, that's a third of what they need. The Boardwalk Inn is small though compared to Yacht Club and Beach Club.
Yeah. One thing I just think is worth mentioning, and it's not totally on topic here, but is that the most risk-averse people are not going to the parks and are not going to Disney Springs. The people who are I think I've talked about it before. There's like 3 tiers in my mind. There's like very risk-averse people who are staying home, not doing anything. There are kind of people in the middle who are cautious and responsible, but also willing to go out and test the waters. And then there are people that just think that range all the way from like this is BS to just totally reckless. And so I think what we're going to see in the early waves are the people that are more towards the middle and the extreme. So you may have more of these people not wearing masks. A higher percentage of people that are disregarding social distancing, not wearing masks, etc. And you could see I don't know. I got my medical degree in epidemiology from Facebook last month, so I don't know, but you may see like a not a false rise in the numbers, but a number that is not representative of the population at large, because the people who are going out right now into these larger public places are less likely to be observing social distancing, wearing the masks, and kind of disregarding the rules. And I wonder, I just kind of wonder what that's going to look like in the long run.
I tend to agree with you in that sort of 3-tier strategy of separating the population, and I do kind of think that you're really only going to have 2 of those 3 tiers go into the parks when they reopen. The high risk and high safety concern group is not going to go to the parks, but that also means that the whole reopening is much less likely to turn into a problem, because if the high risk group doesn't go, they're not going to catch coronavirus. So the
other extreme will not go either. The other extreme won't go either because they say nobody's making me wear a mask.
Well, that's right too. Yeah. So those people. So ideally, what you want is that middle section to go, because they're going to go. They're cautious, but they're not supremely afraid. They're going to wear a mask because they're cautious and respectable. And they're going to be safe, and they're not going to catch coronavirus. So you're going to have the people that are at a very high risk not go, which means the number of cases isn't going to like climb drastically, because all those people that are at high risk aren't going to be there. And you're going to have the people that don't go because they don't like the mask situation, which means if everybody wears masks, there's going to be less transmission of the virus. So, I think it's going to be very, in my mind, it's going to be very unlikely that these slow reopenings with all these precautions in place, actually contribute to any sort of drastic increase in coronavirus cases. I mean, it may tick up a little bit, but there's not, in my mind, going to be a drastic jump that causes the governor to come back and say, all right, shut everything down again. I just don't think that's going to happen. And I think maybe it's because the people that are going out are less likely to catch coronavirus. Maybe it's because of the social distancing. Maybe it's because of the capacity caps. It's very likely to be a combination of all these things.
Well, for Orange County, just this weekend, we doubled the cases here. So we went from 20 new cases per day to today 40 new cases. So for Orange County, with 3 million people, that's still okay, but that's double. And a week or week and a half ago, we were at 10 cases. So the more that people come out, the more cases you're going to see. But is that what it takes to keep everything closed?
Well, that's a very good point. Very good point. Is that I think 3 million people would argue that the difference between 20 and 40 cases is very minuscule and maybe not even statistically significant, although I just got my statistics degree from Facebook last week too, just like you, Eric.
I was working on I was doing constitutional law on Twitter.
Okay. No, but I think that's the argument of a lot of people who are in favor of reopening, is that, 20 people versus 40 people, yeah, it's double, but out of 3 million, it's still minuscule. That's the reopening argument in a nutshell right there. But also, those cases that were just diagnosed in the past couple days, those cases probably came about 2 weeks ago, because that's the sort of standard thought of the incubation period. So it's not like any of these people that just got diagnosed with coronavirus in the past day or two caught it at City Walk or Disney Springs. They absolutely did not. Anyone who caught it at Disney Springs or City Walk isn't going to be diagnosed for another week or two. So, what's the cause of those cases? Well, I mean, they did reopen some restaurants a couple weeks ago, so that's very likely to happen. But I think, I think if you'd ask a lot of Floridians, they're so happy that they can go out to eat at a restaurant that the difference between 20 and 40 cases of coronavirus is pretty minimal in their mind. I would say, yeah, it certainly could increase again. It probably will bounce back up as things start to reopen. Certainly when Universal reopens, things might take a little spike or something, but still when you put it in perspective of a percentage of people, it's like 1/1000th of 1% of the population of Orange County. I mean, honestly, 1/1000th of 1% of the population of Orange County probably gets killed in auto accidents every year, but they don't make everyone in Orange County stop driving. So when you look at it from that perspective, I mean, that's the argument of the people who are very in favor of reopening, that you can't. There has to be some sort of significant danger. And 20 people catching coronavirus, in their mind, is not significant danger out of a population of 3 million.
It's really hard right now, because I know people from both sides of the spectrum. I have a team member at Universal that has to go back to work, that in his opinion, it's too early to go back. And he's like, if we don't have a choice, so even if you say like, we're here and you do have a choice wearing a mask or not, the people that have to work don't have a choice, and I get that. But on the other side, I have a friend who's a waiter, and he can't wait to get back to work because there's no income. And I think that right now we couldn't be more like divided between people who say it's too early, let's all stay home, and then the other side, people who don't make a living and soon might be out of a home or might have to move because the income is not coming back. This is Central Florida. Tourism is all that this place have.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. And somebody in the
And I was going to say that.
said,
Sorry, I was just going to jump in and say, we're talking about the three tiers from Eric. I think that if you also cast that onto the companies, onto the theme park operators, they all are also in a continuum of a high risk acceptability all the way down to a low risk acceptability. If you take Gatorland and Fun Spot, they're probably the high risk takers. And if you take Universal, they're probably in the middle. And if you take Disney, they're probably at the low risk, the high risk aversion, low risk takers. And there's an economic driver. There's probably a decision. There's a return. There's a benefit analysis that says, okay, the risk at this point, as far as what we know, is worth the avoiding the economic damage, because there's not only damage from the virus, there's damage from the lack of income and people, losing out on being able to have a life because they have no income. Those two curves meet somewhere. And for Fun Spot, it was earlier. For Universal, it's a little bit later next week. And Disney, it's TBD. So I think the corporations are behaving very much like people, where some really want to wait a lot, and if they can, because they maybe are working at home and have an income, they're great, they're fine, they don't need to go out and do anything. But there are other people, like people who are in the service industry. My son works in a bakery. He has to go to work. They otherwise they don't get income, they don't have a business. Right. So and there's a decision that his boss and he has to make every day as to what's the risk, and right now the risk is acceptable.
But the bakery also wasn't mandated to close by the government.
It is.
He has a decision.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
True.
So he has a decision to make. These people, the cast members that work at the theme park, didn't have any decision. It was decided for them. And I think that's where a lot of the population as a whole is getting annoyed and irritated. Other than being stuck at home for 2 months and getting irritated by that, I think there's now more so than ever recognition of the inequity of this closure, and you basically hit the nail on the head. Where if you work in certain industries, you're fine. Right? Like, I work from home normally, and so I have not been impacted in my job at all due to the closure. But if you work in the hospitality industry, you've been impacted 100%. To me, it's the same thing like in retail. Okay, so Target, because they sell food, is allowed to stay open, but that means that people can go to Target and shop for clothes. But then you have a clothing retailer like Kohl's that only sells clothes, and they have to close down. So there's really a significant amount of unfairness in the impact of the closures to these different retailers, because whether they happen to sell food or not. And the same thing happens in the job, in the employment of different people, where you can work in the theme parks and you're impacted, and you can work in a bakery and you're not. And I think that's where the economic factor and the people that are concerned about the economic damage are having the biggest argument, is that it's not like it's impacting everybody the same amount. It's kind of arbitrary. It's not like you had it's not like you were able to decide how to be impacted or if you wanted to be impacted. It was kind of decided for you by the government. And the government is making their decisions based on maybe they're making it based on science, maybe not. I don't know. I'm not even getting into that argument here. But the government is making decisions based on something, and it's impacting different people differently. And certainly it's impacting Orlando and Central Florida a hell of a lot more than it's impacting, other parts of Florida or other states or whatever.
This is amplified by the fact that unemployment checks are not being received in Florida.
Well,
people have been unemployed for 8-10 weeks, and they're not. Yeah, so you got furloughed from Disney, and you say
and incompetence.
But if you're a Disney cast member, you've been furloughed, people say, well, you're making more money because there's a certain amount of money set aside. The Florida unemployment is laughably low, but the federal government is supplementing that with another $600 a week or whatever it is. Right. Well,
but it hasn't
if
come
you're not
in
getting
yet.
that, what does it matter? You want to just work.
I mean, you'll get it eventually, which is the good news. I mean, in all financial, financial people say you should always have like 3 months of salary set aside for, rainy day fund or whatever. So,
unless you're a Fortune 500 corporation, in which case you might just need to go to the government to be bailed out after 2 weeks of reduced revenue. Yeah. Sorry.
But yeah, I mean, there are absolutely tons of people who aren't receiving unemployment, and that's the incompetence of state government almost in all cases, whether they're like Florida and just can't get their act together, or they're like New Jersey and their servers are 40 years old and no one can update them because no one knows the computer programming language that they were built with in the 60s. That's just state government incompetence. And at some point people will get their money. It may be too late to prevent their house from being foreclosed on, which is the unfortunate aspect of things. And it's like, well, the difference between a bakery and a Disney World cast member is the difference between a job and not a job. But think about the difference between a Disney cast member.
One was furloughed and one wasn't. I mean, one, like you said,
think about the difference between a Disney cast member and a Universal cast member, right? Like you're both theme park workers, but one of you is getting paid and one of you is not. And it all goes back to a decision that you made, 6 months, a year, 10 years ago of who you want to work for. I think I've seen a number of Disney cast members come out and say they're not going to go back to work for Disney because they do not like how they've been treated. I certainly don't see that from Universal cast members.
But you have the other side as well, as we've seen from recent Twitter discussions, people that blindly follow Disney after all what they have done, and then just saying like, oh no, Disney is still treating us good. They just follow them with their eyes closed because they like working there. And I get there. It's a great place to work.
If you love your job, it's a great place. It absolutely is.
But then at the baseline, they didn't treat their employees well. And you have to see Disney not as, oh, Disney the parks and poor Disney. You have to see Disney as the empire, as we bought Fox, as we have Disney Plus, we have all this income, but then we're gonna furlough all the people. I get when you put like, oh, look, Universal, but it's Universal, it's owned by Comcast. Yeah, but it's the Walt Disney Company. It's the company that bought Fox, it's the company that had all the money and now is treating their people so bad. And then you have the cast member that says like, oh, they've treated me like shit. And then I see my friends at Universal being treated way better. And then you have the other side saying like, I love my job and I will stay at Disney and I get it why they do it and I will continue. But to be honest, they weren't treated as they should. They were not treated as they could have been, and I think still upon this day, communication. If Twitter has to tell you you need to go back to work, or you're being furloughed before Disney does, then there's something wrong with Disney, not with the people who tell you on Twitter.
We absolutely know that Disney communication is generally horrendous, and it certainly hasn't been any better during the pandemic and the closures. They pretty much have not come out and said anything publicly, except for what Bob Iger said on CNBC once or something. But there's been there's been no communication for the most part, or what little communication there has been pretty poor in terms of communication with annual pass holders, with people with reservations, and things like that. It's all terrible, terrible communication, and none of that surprises me. I mean, it's been happening pre-pandemic. You know, I mean, they're confused. They're confused themselves. How do you expect them to make a coherent statement to the public when they don't even know what they're doing? And the other problem is, like, they have these lawyers that say, here's the company word, and no one can stray from it. So, you know, you call and say, hey, when are you opening? And they're like, there's no plans to open at this time. And then tomorrow they could come out with an announcement, right? So obviously there were plans to open, but they're not allowed to tell you, and that's part of the communication problem. Is that they can't say anything, but then, hey, WWNT just announced that internal documents state that Disney's going to open at some point, and nobody at the Walt Disney Company knows because somebody leaked it from higher up, and 99.9% of the cast members in Florida did not hear this, but we did, and that's company communication at its poorest, and the Walt Disney Company is very good at poor communication.
Although it is interesting in this case, the lack of quote-unquote leaks about opening dates and plans. We had the supposed list of what would open and what wouldn't open in the protocols and so on, but it's been extremely quiet in the rumor mill and in the third party. I heard somebody say, somebody said, and so on, which to me at least is a little different from almost all the other things, be it a new ride or a product release, or there's always seems to be some sort of leakage. In this one, either they're really holding things tight, which could be, as you say, legal says don't say this or you're out, or maybe there is not a plan yet. I mean, or
there's nobody left. There's nobody anymore.
I was going to just say,
nobody.
Everybody's gone.
They're all gone.
Disney has finally figured out who the leaker is, and they furloughed them. They just happened to furlough like 100,000 other people at the same time, but the leaker's clearly been furloughed, so they have an idea of who the leaker is now, right? They're narrowing in on they're honing in on the leaker. They're figuring it out. I don't want to start a discussion, but I saw something in the chat about negativity. Don't get me wrong. I would not be happier to have this discussion the other way around, that Disney would lead by innovation and that Disney World had said, we're opening, we're having these and these plans, those are coming back, we paid our cast members, we're getting them back, we're doing this, we're doing that. That would be the dream. But unfortunately, it's not. And what we're discussing is mostly just the facts. And it's a fact that Universal is going to open next week. Because in like, what, seven days, Universal is going to open. And upon this day, we haven't heard anything from Disney. And then you have to admit at some point that Universal, although smaller than Disney, has taken a lead. If you furlough people and they have to get that news from Twitter, you're stop paying them, and Universal is still paying them 80% and keeping them on board, then again, Universal is winning that battle. Those are all just facts. They made a decision.
Not to be negative.
Universal made a decision, and it's turning out to benefit them. Whether that decision was made with some kind of business intelligence or strategy in mind, or whether they just flipped a coin, I don't know, but their decisions have benefited them, and Disney's decisions have not similarly benefited Disney. I think, like I said, Disney's bigger, yeah. If they wanted to just reopen the Magic Kingdom and 2 hotels, I think they could. I think they'd have enough cast members at the flip of a hat to reopen just the Magic Kingdom. But the fact is they're not, and they haven't even announced anything yet. The people that call this show depressing issues, as Axel said, I'd much rather be here hyping things up and being excited about what Disney's doing. But the sad fact is they're not doing anything exciting. If they start doing something exciting, we'll be more than happy to talk about and be excited about it. But in any case, I'm just trying to see what else was in the chat. Yeah.
So do we figure out
comedy show?
Go
end? Watch WW News Tonight, like I said earlier.
Did we figure out that in the end, the Disney cast members will actually, assuming unemployment comes through eventually, will actually make more money in the end than Universal employees? They just won't have had cash flow for a few months. Is that a fair statement?
Probably. I mean, if we know that Universal pays more than Disney. Whether it's 20% more, I don't know. But yeah, if Universal's making 80% of their normal pay, if the Disney cast members generally make more than 80% of a Universal, then they should. But it all depends on how much unemployment comes through.
Offload the payroll onto the taxpayers is the difference. Universal's footing the bill, and in this case, Disney is not.
Right, absolutely. Right. Disney is forcing the government to foot the bill instead of footing the bill themselves. And we talked about, Universal being owned by Comcast versus Disney. I mean, what's the bigger company in terms of market cap? I think Disney's the bigger company. But are they... Disney's just simply not well diversified to survive a pandemic as well as Comcast. That's really all. I mean, Comcast is making a ton of money from internet and cable services because that's what people use when they sit home. Disney's not making anywhere near enough money from Disney Plus to be in that same ballpark. Their income is much more at risk from a pandemic than Comcast's income overall. That's the problem. But I think the stock price has been going up simply because things are starting to reopen. Investors are kind of dumb in a lot of cases, in my mind. Like they don't bid the stock price up until Disney starts to reopen. I mean, I knew 3 months ago that Disney was eventually going to reopen. So, I bought stock at $90 and now it's $118. I'm making a buttload of money because these investors are dumb and didn't decide to bid up the stock until Disney started to reopen. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing I don't want to get into. We're kind of at our 2-hour mark, so I want to start to wrap things up. I want to give everybody else on the panel an opportunity to say anything else that they haven't said yet tonight about any of our topics, and then we'll wrap this thing up.
Jason, I think I've said all I want to say on the topics. It's an interesting topic. We could go on for days on this. I don't know if it's appropriate or not. I just wanted to remind everyone that tomorrow is Memorial Day. I'm a veteran, as many of you know. I was a Marine for 6 years. Tomorrow we don't thank veterans. We honor the people who actually went away to war and didn't come back. So I just wanted to send a salute out to my former platoon sergeant, Gunnery Sergeant Ron Baum, who gave his life in Iraq on May 3rd, 2004, as a part of Counter Intel Human Intelligence Company, 2nd Intel Battalion, 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force. So just wanted to remind you guys what it's all about tomorrow. It's I know we like cooking hot dogs and having a good time, and I'll be trying my best to have a good time as well. But I just wanted to mention that when I had a chance to.
Very good. Thank you, Eric. Yes. And we'll be cooking hot dogs. Just please don't do it at Disney Springs.
Yeah.
I just have one more thing. You can't beat Eric's message. But it's a message in general, and especially for people on social media everywhere talking about me in person or Walt Disney World News today. If we talk about Disney, it's because we love Disney a lot. It's like you love your kids and you're going to make remarks on your kids and you're going to want to steer them straight. And that's the same thing with Disney. If we wouldn't love Disney and everything around it, we wouldn't have all these podcasts. We wouldn't put all this time into it. It's because we love Disney, we love the parks. I think if you look in the background from anybody, we can't lie about that. But sometimes it's not always the dream world that it could be or that we want it to be. And you can pixie dust it all. And we could be playing podcasts from 2 years ago and posting pictures when everything was open and when there was a lot of people. But that's not the case right now. And it's as sad as it is, the times that we're in now need to be talked about as well. And they're not a pretty part in Disney history, but better times will come. But that's not being negative, that's being objective. And that's how it is.
Yep. Well said, Axel. I'll just add to that by saying, obviously I have a green screen behind me. I'm not sitting in Epcot right now. If I would take down the green screen, you'd see a whole bunch of SeaWorld merchandise on my walls, and that's why I have it. Just kidding. But yeah, I've said this before in other arenas, but I'll liken our love of Disney to somebody that loves their hometown baseball team, but they haven't won the World Series in 55 years. You love your hometown baseball team. You really do want them to succeed, but you get really annoyed and upset when they make stupid decisions that prevents them from succeeding. And when they make stupid mistakes that cost them the game, and when they make dumb decisions that cost them a place in the World Series or the Championship Series, you still love them, but you're not happy with them right now at the moment. And you'd be much happier when they start making smart decisions and spending their money wisely, and not getting rid of your favorite player or Epcot Pavilion, and instead building with what they have and not tearing things down. And that is what makes you happy, and they're just not doing it. But it's not like you love them less, and it's not like you hate them. You just don't like the way they're acting right now. And I will say the announcement of Josh D'Amaro being promoted to chairman of Parks and Resorts is probably the best news that we've gotten in ages in terms of Disney management. We didn't even talk about that tonight, partially because we had a lot of other things to talk about. It may be a topic for the future, but anybody that's met Josh at Walt Disney World in the past year since he's been president of Walt Disney World knows that Josh is a great guy. And I think at this point, with Josh installed as chairman of Parks and Resorts, things are looking very bright. I kind of liken this to way back in 2003, 2004 with the Paul Pressler, Cynthia Harris regime at Disneyland, and lack of maintenance and people getting killed due to lack of maintenance. And then Matt Ouimet came in and really turned things around. I kind of hope that Josh D'Amaro is going to sort of follow in the footsteps of Matt Ouimet and turn the Parks and Resorts around and stop tearing out the heart of the parks, and instead doing right by the fans and doing what's right for the parks and not just what's right for the bottom line. Anyway, more on Josh D'Amaro next week. Also, I know that I've promised for a couple weeks now that we're going to talk about DVC. Unfortunately, David and Marcy couldn't make it again tonight. As soon as David and Marcy can make it, we're going to talk about DVC, I promise. So stay tuned. It'll come up in sometime as soon as we can get them on board. But yeah, so Rich, do you want to say anything? Closing words for tonight?
Yeah, I probably should. I think I say it every week, but it is fun to speculate.
Oh, you're at Epcot now too. I see how it is.
And see, you're not the only one. And that's what a lot of what we do. We know some facts, and then we extrapolate from the facts, and it leads to a fun discussion. But I just want to make sure. I mean, we don't know a lot of what's going on. Most people don't know a lot of what's going on. We just take the news that we have and we make some interesting discussion, and it's fun. It's enjoy, and we do it because we like Disney World. We like Disney in general. I mean, I entered Disney via the animation years and years and years ago, and it's a good place that has somewhat lost its way, perhaps. But we'll see. The future, as Axel said, is the future, and we hope that it's a bright one. And we'll see when they open, right? We will know, hopefully, as soon as anybody knows, and we'll be on it right away.
Yep. Two last things. Somebody in the chat brought up hard ticket events like after hours so they can have fireworks, because obviously when we talked about secure circuit protocol, there were going to be no nighttime spectaculars. And somebody brought up hard ticket events so they can have fireworks. Yeah, we don't know what's going on with hard ticket events. I will say that I have, for when I come down in June, part of the reason we picked the week that we did was because there's a Villains After Hours, there's an H2O Glow Nights, and there's an Early Morning Magic all in that week. And I have tickets for all of them. Whether any of those things will actually happen, I do not know. I kind of think a Villains After Hours event without fireworks is not going to be worth the ticket price that they're charging. So it may be the case that if they do have after hours events, that will be the only fireworks that happen. I'm kind of thinking more along the lines they won't have after hours events at all for the foreseeable future, but we don't know. We'll have to see. But thanks everybody. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. We had record live viewers tonight, so thank you again. Certainly more live viewers tonight than WDW News Tonight did on Thursday. So thank you for that. And please tune in to WDW News Tonight so Tom doesn't get mad at me again. Anyways, yes. Also, I will give a shout out. I don't know how many of you watched our live show last night where we raised money for the cast member pantry. If you don't know what the cast member pantry is, it's an organization that is taking donations of groceries and distributing them to cast members who've been furloughed so they can eat. We raised over $5,500 for the cast member pantry last night. The live show was all on YouTube. If you didn't see it, you can certainly go back and watch it if you want to. But I'm really happy and proud of everybody at WWNT who worked on that show and contributed to it in any way. And I'm very, very happy and proud of all of our viewers who helped us raise over $5,000 for this wonderful cause to help out Disney cast members that are not having much luck with jobs and state unemployment checks and needing some help to tide them over. So yeah, you'll hear more about that when we present the check to the cast member pantry this week. But you can certainly go back and watch the show from last night. It was a lot of fun. All of the live shows that we've been doing over the past 2 months of the closure had like a little snippet of what they do, except for us because we were on tonight. So I said we don't need to be on 2 nights in a row. But yeah, so it was a really great show. It was a lot of fun. I know everybody had a lot of fun participating, and we pulled that all together in a really, really short span of time. So kudos to everybody at WWNT and everybody that donated and watched last night for helping out. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say. We need tons more content, 50 hours a week. Well, 14 was pretty rough. Well, no, it was 4 to 5 hours a day content-wise. So we almost had 35 hours. I think you'll be getting a 60-hour show this Thanksgiving for our annual Toys for Tots Marathon. I believe Tom has decreed that that's going to be a 60-hour show this week, or this year. So stay tuned for that. But I think we all need a little bit of a break from this twice-a-day daily live shows. And hopefully Disney, after the Disney Springs reopening this week, the rest of Disney will follow soon. And we can all get back and enjoy the parks. And then we'll have much more exciting stuff to talk about on this show. And yeah, so tune in again next week. next week. Like I said, we'll talk about Josh tomorrow and his promotion and what that means for the company, as well as maybe some of the people that are taking, also taking other positions within the company. There was a pretty big management shakeup. And we'll see what happens there. Oh, yeah. The other thing I wanted to say, Rich, right before the commercial, I was talking about who's making these decisions, and whether it's legal, whether it's business strategy, or whether it's some executives or whatever. I certainly think that the absence of a Parks and Resorts chairman has hurt the company tremendously in this time. And not having a competent CEO is also a problem. We talked plenty about that before. But yeah, so but that all folds in with Josh tomorrow being promoted, which is something we're going to talk about at length next week. And the reopening of Disney Springs that happens this Wednesday. Stay tuned to WDW News Today for coverage of that, and then we will come back and talk in detail about that next Sunday night. What our thoughts are, what it means for the rest of Walt Disney World reopening. We'll give you an update. I'll give you an update on whether my June 16th reservations got canceled in the span of the next week. Yeah, tune in again next week. Thanks for watching, everybody, and have a great night.
Good night, everyone.